Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. This one is an entitled People Pro Revenge story. My family has owned a quaint little cabin up in the mountains for over 50 years now. It started off as a humble one-room shelter that my grandfather built with his own two hands after he returned from serving in World War II. Over the decades, each generation added their own touches. Extra bedrooms, a stone fireplace, a wraparound porch. That modest cabin eventually transformed into a cozy retreat that's been the backdrop for countless family memories over the years. Last fall, I finally inherited the place after my dad passed away. As the only child, it was now my duty to carry on our family legacy. I looked forward to spending weekends up there, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Don't get me wrong, I love the conveniences of modern urban living. But there's something special about being surrounded by nature, fresh mountain air, and precious memories. Unfortunately, my tranquility didn't last very long. A few weeks after I officially took ownership, a new neighbor moved into the cabin next door. And when I say cabin, I use that term very loosely. It was more like a fancy log mansion fitted with the most modern amenities. I introduced myself and welcomed her to the area, figuring we could be friends. Boy, was I wrong. The first sign of trouble was when she insisted I only refer to her as Mrs. Karen Smith, not just Karen. I didn't spend 16 years in school for nothing, she declared haughtily. Odd flex, but okay, I decided to oblige her. The request only got more bizarre and entitled from there. She demanded I stop playing any music on my porch because it disrupted her peace and quiet. Never mind the fact that she blasted ranchera music every morning at dawn. When I politely asked her to maybe turn down the volume a bit, she accused me of being racist and threatening her. Another time, she asked me to stop hanging wind chimes because the tinkling sounds gave her anxiety. Instead of just talking to me directly, she called the cops and cried about me purposefully triggering her mental illness. The poor deputy who responded looked utterly confused, as was I. The final straw came when I was up at the cabin on a rare weekday off. I awoke to angry pounding on my front door. I opened it to find Mrs. Karen Smith standing there in a fury. "I demand that you sell me this horrid shack immediately," she declared. "I'm willing to offer you $50,000 cash for it right now." I stared at her, convinced this had to be a prank. Excuse me? This cabin has been in my family for 50 years. It's not for sale," I replied, utterly baffled. "Don't be stupid now," she said condescendingly. "My husband and I require more space, so your little shanty needs to go. Though I'm generous for even offering you anything for this dump." My blood started boiling as she insulted the place I held so dear. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but this land and cabin are not for sale," I stated firmly. "They have sentimental value that can't be replaced by money. I kindly ask you to leave my property at once." She refused to budge, insisting that she had a right to make offers on any dilapidated structure bringing down property values. I shut the door in her face and called the sheriff, figuring he could talk some sense into her. Big mistake. As soon as he arrived, Karen burst into tears and accused me of threatening her safety. She made up outrageous lies, claiming I brandished a rifle at her and used racial slurs. The sheriff saw right through her act, especially when I showed him my porch security camera footage. She went off screeching about suing the department for not protecting her rights as a tax-paying citizen. At that point, I'd had it with her unhinged behavior. I filed a restraining order which legally prohibited her from contacting me or stepping foot on my property. I also submitted noise complaints and harassment claims against her to the local authorities. Unfortunately, Crazy Karen refused to leave me alone. She tried having her lawyers argue she had grandfathered water rights from a creek on my land. Complete hogwash since her mansion was newly built, and that creek has always been part of my property. When that ploy failed, she attempted to have my cabin declared a noise nuisance for the wind chimes I'd restored after her demands to remove them. The sheriff warned that he would arrest her if she continued with these ridiculous allegations and legal schemes. Not only that, I discovered she had erected tacky garden gnomes facing directly onto my land, somehow thinking this would annoy me into selling. If anything, it gave me a good laugh and made her seem even more unhinged. The petty antics continued, including things like blaring Mariah Carey's "All I Want for Christmas Is You" on loop and shining floodlights into my windows all night. She obviously had too much time and money on her hands. I, on the other hand, had a job and a life to get back to in the city. The breaking point came when I drove up one weekend to find my precious cabin ransacked. Karen had broken in and trashed the place, destroying generations of family mementos and heirlooms. This time, the sheriff was not so forgiving. She was arrested on felony burglary and property destruction charges. Turns out she was also on parole for previous harassment issues, and the judge revoked her bail and probation. I happily supplied surveillance footage and testified against her in court. The judge, recognizing Karen's unstable behavioral patterns, ordered her to pay damages for the broken sentimental items and issued the longest restraining order legally allowed. As Karen was dragged away screaming threats, the entire courtroom gave me a standing ovation. Justice had been served at last. Her long-suffering husband ended up divorcing her and moved away, leaving the log mansion abandoned. I've since repaired the cherished family cabin, making it homier than ever. The garden gnomes add a certain kitschy charm. I finally have the peace and quiet that allows me to reflect on fond memories and appreciate the simpler things in life. Sometimes dealing with a crazy neighbor reminds you not to take the good ones for granted. As for entitled Karen, I hope she's enjoying the view from her jail cell. The next one is a malicious compilant story. The day my uncle died was the day I finally quit that terrible job. I had been working as a cashier at a small family-owned Italian restaurant in my hometown. Business was slow, so most of my shifts were spent sitting around waiting for the odd customer to wander in. The pay was lousy too, just $9 an hour, but it was a job, and I needed the money while I looked for something better. When I got the call from my aunt that my uncle had passed away, I was devastated. Even though I hadn't seen him in a couple years, we were close when I was younger. He had even promised to take me out to dinner when I graduated high school to celebrate. Now that would never happen. I asked my aunt when the funeral would be so I could request the day off work. My manager, Mike, kept hounding me for details so he could schedule around it. I felt bad having to keep calling my grieving aunt for more information just to appease Mike, but I didn't have a choice. Finally, I told Mike the date. That's when he dropped the bombshell. "You can't take that day off. We don't have anyone to cover your shift." I was stunned. Never in my life had an employer refused to give me time off for a family funeral. "Nothing is stopping me from going," I told Mike angrily. "Not even this job." That's when his wife Jenny got involved. She was pregnant at the time and worked as the head cook. "We all have struggles," she lectured me. "You need to learn to leave your personal issues at home when you're at work." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. In the past few months alone, my last grandparent had died. My mom was diagnosed with cancer, and now my uncle too. And Jenny thought I should just shove those feelings down and put on a happy face at work? "If you were going through what I have while pregnant, you'd be a crying mess," I shot back at her. "So don't talk to me about leaving my struggles at home." Jenny just shook her head and said coldly, "I'm sorry for your loss, but you still can't miss work that day." That was the last straw. Without another word, I finished up my closing duties, grabbed my things, and walked out, ignoring Jenny's calls after me. The next morning, I slept in late, only to be awoken by banging on my door. It was my mom saying the restaurant had called, asking why I didn't show up to my shift. "I quit," I told her bluntly, and explained what had happened. She looked at me like I was being unreasonable to throw away a job over this. But I didn't care. Some things are more important than work. I wasn't about to miss my uncle's funeral for a crappy minimum wage job. In the end, I heard through the grapevine that the restaurant went under a few months later. Can't say I was surprised. Maybe if Mike and Jenny had treated their staff better, instead of threatening them over taking bereavement leave, things would have turned out differently. But I guess I'll never know. Wherever my uncle is now, I hope he knows I made the right choice. Rest in peace. The next one is Am I the A-hole story. So about 2 weeks ago, we got hit by this massive storm that just ravaged the whole area. I'm talking downed power lines, trees ripped right out of the ground, no electricity for days. It was nuts. Now, this was the first big storm since my wife Jen and I bought our house out in the country. We've got acres of forested land around us, which we just love, but it definitely caused some damage that we're still cleaning up. The worst part was this line of 50 huge old oak trees, probably planted back in the 40s, that borders our property. The storm just tore right through them, leaves and branches everywhere. For the past few weeks, Jen and I have been sawing away at the debris, piling up the limbs out near the road so the city can come grab them. Our neighbors Bob and Barb, who are in their 70s, have been doing the same, clearing up their lawn and stacking branches out on the curb. Neither of our piles were crazy big or anything. I figured I could clear them out in a few trips with my SUV. But last week when we were all outside working, Bob calls over, "Hey, we should really get someone out here with a truck to haul all this away. Could split the cost instead of calling 2 trucks for these little piles." I said that sounded like a great idea, since I'd be out of town all week anyway. Told him to call around, and if he found someone, I'd gladly go halves with them. I'm thinking maybe a couple hours of work between our 2 driveways, $300 max. Well, Jen and I get back from our trip today, and I get a text from Bob saying the guy can come tomorrow, but our share will be $1,200. Just about spat out my coffee reading that. I texted back that it was way more than we expected, and I'd just take care of both piles myself when I got home. Bob writes back this whole spiel about how he let the guy walk around our forest and acres, and now he's recommending clearing some big fallen logs and taking out a few dying pines. Says he'll do the same kind of work at their place, since Barb needs some small trees taken down too. That's why our $150 job turned into $1,200 apparently. Still haven't written back because the whole thing just feels kinda shady, you know? Like they switched it up on me. I feel crummy because I know Barb put in the work to get an estimate, and they were counting on having it cleared tomorrow. But my wife and I just bought this 100-year-old house and have a million other projects we want to tackle before dropping $1,200 on something we can do ourselves in an afternoon. So, am I being a jerk here for backing out and messing up their plan? I know we said we'd split it originally, but the price is just crazy in my opinion. And I don't want to create bad blood with our neighbors who we really like. But maybe I'm being unreasonable about the money. What do you think? Should I suck it up and pay, or stick to my guns? I'd love to get an outside perspective. Let me know. Comment 1, not the a-hole. The neighbors definitely pulled a bait and switch here. You agreed to split the cost on clearing a couple small piles of branches by the curb, not undertake major landscaping projects on both properties. $1,200 is unreasonable for the original scope of work. Just do the neighborly thing and clear their pile along with yours, but don't feel obligated to pay for anything more. Comment 2, you are the a-hole. You told them you were in if they found someone, so you should honor that commitment. The price may seem high to you, but it's not just about the curbside piles. The contractor assessed the whole situation, including trees that need removal. It's not the neighbor's fault that the quote is higher than expected. You shouldn't back out now and leave them in the lurch. Comment 3, everyone sucks here. The neighbors should have checked with you before expanding the scope of work and agreeing to an astronomical quote. But you also could have been clearer about your budget limitations earlier on. At this point, just offer to split the original cost for hauling away the curbside branches and politely decline the rest. Meet in the middle and split the difference to maintain the friendship. Update. I decided to sleep on it before responding to my neighbor Bob about the ridiculous $1,200 quote. When I woke up, I realized I just had to be honest about my feelings. I texted Bob back saying that I appreciated him looking into quotes, but the price was beyond my budget and the work scope had gotten out of hand. However, I was happy to come by that day and take care of hauling away both of our curbside branch piles for free with my truck. I said I hoped this would resolve the immediate need without any hard feelings. Bob replied thanking me for the offer, but said he felt awful about the whole situation. He confessed that the contractor was actually just his unemployed nephew who came up with the quote. The kid is trying to start his own business and wildly overestimated the work. Bob apologized for not running the price by me first before agreeing to it. He said he'll call around and find a reasonable quote from a real professional, and we'll split it fairly down the middle. What a relief. In the end, we were able to get a legit arborist to come take care of both properties. He charged us only $400 total, so just $200 each, a fraction of what Bob's nephew quoted. And our yards look great again. This just reinforced why I love having such reasonable neighbors. Bob felt terrible about the misunderstanding and made it right. I'm glad I stuck to my guns, but also gave him the benefit of the doubt. We were able to find a solution that worked for both of us. Crisis averted, and happy wife, happy life. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.